Imagine it is 1943. You are 25,000 feet above the Earth. The temperature outside is 60 degrees below zero. It is so cold that if your skin touches bare metal, it freezes instantly, tearing the flesh away when you pull back. You are wearing an electrically heated suit, but if the fuse blows, which happens often, you have minutes before frostbite sets in. You are breathing pure oxygen through a rubber mask. If that mask clogs with ice, you die of anoxia in seconds. And somewhere out there, amidst the clouds, hundreds of German pilots are hunting you, flying machines that are faster and more heavily armed than yours. You are in a B-17 flying fortress. You are a member of the U.S. 8th Air Force, and statistically, you are already dead. This is the story of the most iconic bomber in history. Not just the machine, but the brutal doctrine it was built to serve. A machine designed to prove a controversial theory, that a bomber could fight its way through enemy territory alone and destroy a nation's ability to wage war. It was a gamble that cost more American lives than the entire Marine Corps campaign in the Pacific. This is the legend of the B-17. To understand why the B-17 became a legend, we have to look at how close it came to never existing at all. In 1934, the U.S. Army Air Corps needed a new bomber to protect American coastlines. The contest was supposed to be a formality. The assumption was that the contract would go to Douglas or Martin, who were building twin-engine planes. But Boeing took a massive financial risk. They emptied their bank accounts to build a four-engine giant, the Model TU-99. When it taxied onto the runway, it dwarfed everything else. It carried 5 times the bomb load of the competition. It was faster than the fighter planes of the day. A reporter, seeing the multiple machine gun blisters, coined the name that would stick forever. It's a flying fortress. But on October 30th, 1935, disaster struck. During a test flight, the Model 299 stalled and crashed, killing the test pilot, Major Ployer Hill. The investigation revealed it wasn't a mechanical failure. The pilot had forgotten to disengage the gust locks that held the control surfaces in place. Boeing was disqualified. The contract went to the inferior Douglas B-18. The B-17 should have died right there. But the Army Air Corps saw the potential. They used a legal loophole to order 13 of them for testing. That crash also gave birth to another aviation innovation, the pre-flight checklist. The B-17 was too complex to fly by memory. It required discipline, a trait that would define its crews in the years to come. By the time America entered World War II, a group of generals known as the Bomber Mafia had taken control of the Air Corps. Their religion was daylight precision bombing. The British RAF had tried bombing by day and were slaughtered. They switched to night bombing, targeting entire cities to dehouse the German workforce. It was a sledgehammer. But the Americans wanted to use a scalpel. They believed they could fly high, in broad daylight, and drop a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. The key to this hubris was a device called the Norden bomb sight. It was an analog computer, a secret so guarded that bombardiers had to take an oath to protect it with their lives. In testing, in the clear skies of the Arizona desert, it was miraculous. But Europe was not Arizona. Over Germany, there was cloud cover, industrial haze, and terrifying anti-aircraft fire. In reality, the pickle barrel accuracy was a myth. Studies later showed that under combat conditions, only 50% of American bombs fell within a quarter mile of the target. But to drop them even that close, the B-17 had to fly straight and level, the most dangerous thing a pilot can do in war. Let's look inside the machine that had to survive this environment. By 1944, The B-17G was the definitive version. It was powered by 4 Wright Cyclone radial engines, each pumping out 1,200 horsepower. Crucially, they had turbo superchargers, allowing the plane to breathe in the thin air of high altitude, something German fighters struggled to do. Up front, the bombardier and navigator sat in a glass nose. It offered the best view in the war, but it was also the most vulnerable. If a fighter attacked head-on, there was nothing between you and 20mm cannon shells but a pane of plexiglass. Behind them, the pilot and co-pilot. Flying a B-17 was physical labor. There were no hydraulics for the controls. You moved the control surfaces with cables and pulleys. Pilots would come home drenched in sweat, their muscles aching from wrestling a 30-ton beast through turbulence. But the worst job was the ball turret gunner. You were curled into a fetal position inside a plexiglass sphere hanging from the belly of the plane. You were isolated from the rest of the crew. If the mechanical gears jammed, you were trapped. If the landing gear failed and the plane had to do a belly landing, you were finished. And in the middle, the waist gunners, standing before open windows, blasting away at 200 miles per hour winds. The floor was covered in spent brass casings, making it slippery like ice. It was a chaotic, deafening factory of war. The theory of the self-defending bomber stated that if you packed B-17s into a tight formation called a combat box, their overlapping machine gun fire would create a zone of death that no fighter could penetrate. In 1943, the Luftwaffe proved that theory wrong. German pilots quickly analyzed the B-17. They realized the defensive guns were slower to track targets moving at high closure rates. They began the 12 o'clock high attack, flying head-on at 600 miles per hour combined speed. The B-17s, initially lacking a nose turret, were helpless. The crisis peaked in the autumn of 1943. On October 14th, the 8th Air Force targeted the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. 291 B-17 took off. They flew beyond the range of their fighter escorts, deep into the heart of the Reich. It was a massacre. The Luftwaffe launched everything they had. They used air-to-air rockets to break up the formations, then picked off the stragglers. 60 B-17s were shot down. Another 17 crashed on landing. 121 were damaged. That is nearly 20% of the force wiped out in a single afternoon. The morale at the bases in England crumbled. A tour of duty was 25 missions. But the average life expectancy of a bomber and crew was only 11 missions. Crews stopped unpacking their bags. They stopped making friends with new replacements. They were participating in a war of attrition where they were the ones being eroded. And yet, the B-17 kept flying. The one thing the engineers got right was structural redundancy. The plane was built like a tank. Take the story of the All-American. Over Tunisia in 1943, a German fighter, spiraling out of control, sliced through the B-17's rear fuselage. The tail was hanging by a few jagged strips of metal. The control cables were severed. By all laws of physics, the tail should have snapped off, sending the plane into a death spin. But the pilots, nursing the throttles, flew it 90 minutes back to base. They landed safely. When the ambulance driver arrived, he waved them off. No one was injured. The plane was scrap, but the crew was alive. Stories like this circulated the mess halls. They gave the men just enough hope to climb back in the next morning. But bravery and durability couldn't win the war alone. The B-17 needed a guardian. It arrived in 1944, the P-51 Mustang. Previous escorts, like the P-47 Thunderbolt, ran out of fuel halfway to the target, forced to turn back just as the German fighters attacked. The Mustang, equipped with external fuel tanks and a highly efficient laminar flow wing, could fly all the way to Berlin and back. When General Jimmy Doolittle took command of the 8th Air Force, he saw a new opportunity. He changed the orders. He told his fighter pilots, "Your job is no longer to escort the bombers. Your job is to hunt the German Air Force." The B-17 became bait. During Big Week in early 1944, thousands of bombers were sent up to draw the Luftwaffe out. When the German fighters rose to attack the slow, helpless bombers, they were bounced by swarms of Mustangs. It broke the back of the Luftwaffe. By D-Day, the Allies owned the sky. By 1945, the precision bombing doctrine had largely given way to area bombing, aided by radar. The B-17s, now numbering in the thousands, were dismantling Germany piece by piece. They targeted oil refineries, rail yards, and factories. The German war machine ground to a halt. Tanks ran out of fuel. Jets sat on runways with no kerosene. The B-17 had strangled the Third Reich. Boeing built 12,731 B-17. Today, fewer than 10 are still flying. When you see one at an air show, it looks glamorous. The nose art, the silver skin. But we must remember the reality. 26,000 men of the 8th Air Force never came home. 47,000 were wounded. It was a war of cold, noise, and terror, fought by boys in aluminum cans. The B-17 was an engineering marvel. Yes, it was unkillable. But the men inside were not. They flew into the valley of death, relying on their formation, their machine, and each other. And they saved the world. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please like and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, would you have chosen the ball turret or the tail gunner position? I'll see you in the next one.